Welcome back to the Oceanfront Builders channel. We're so glad you're here. If you're a fan of detailed construction deep dives, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what we have coming up. Today, we're tackling a subject that is the absolute bedrock of every single construction project, yet it's one of the most misunderstood, most frustrating, and most critical hurdles to overcome. We're talking about zoning laws, specifically right here in our backyard of Southern California. So what is zoning? Forget the legal jargon for a second. Think of it like this. Your city is a giant library. Zoning laws are the library's organizational system. You have the fiction section, the nonfiction section, the children's area, the quiet study rooms. You wouldn't put a loud screaming toddler's play area in the middle of the silent research section, right? And you wouldn't put a massive, noisy factory in the middle of a quiet residential neighborhood. Zoning is the set of rules that dictates what can be built, where it can be built, and how it can be built, ensuring that different land uses are compatible with each other. It's what separates the residential R zones from the commercial C zones and the industrial M zones. Now, why is this so important for you as a homeowner, a potential buyer, or an investor? Because that one-letter, one-number code attached to your property, like R1, C2, or R3, is the single most powerful factor determining what you can and cannot do with your land. It dictates the size of your home, whether you can build a second unit in the backyard, how big your commercial building can be, and how many parking spaces you need. Ignoring zoning is like trying to build a house without a foundation. The entire project will collapse before you even pour the concrete. Here in Southern California, particularly in Los Angeles and Orange counties, this isn't a simple one-size-fits-all system. It's a complex, layered patchwork of city ordinances, county regulations, specific plans, overlay zones, and now a whole host of state laws that can sometimes override the local rules. It's a living, breathing document that changes constantly. What was legal to build last year might not be legal this year, and vice versa. So, let's start with the most fundamental question. How do you even find out what your property is zoned for? The good news is, in the digital age, this is easier than ever. For the city of Los Angeles, your first stop should be the LA Department of City Planning's ZIMAS portal. That's ZIMAS, which stands for Zone Information and Map Access System. You can type in any address in the city of LA and it will spit out a treasure trove of information. It will tell you your basic zone, like R11, but it will also tell you about any overlays, specific plans, or special districts you're in, like a hillside area, a coastal zone, or a historic preservation overlay zone. We'll get into what all those mean later, but ZIMAS is your starting point. For other cities in LA County, like Santa Monica, Long Beach, or Pasadena, and for all the cities in Orange County, like Irvine, Newport Beach, or Anaheim, you'll typically go to that specific city's planning department or community development website. They almost always have an interactive zoning map. You find your parcel, click on it, and it will tell you your designation. A word of caution. While these online tools are fantastic, they are not a legal guarantee. They are a starting point. The absolute definitive truth is found in the city's official zoning map and municipal code, which brings us to the next step, understanding what the code actually means. Let's say you've looked up your property in a quiet neighborhood in Torrance and found that it's zoned R1, single-family residential. Great. But what does that actually mean? This is where you have to dive into that city's municipal code. Every city has one, and it's usually available online. You'll navigate to the planning or zoning section, and you'll find a chapter that describes the R1 zone. This is where the real detail lives. It's not just about allowing a single-family home. It's about a whole set of development standards. Let's break down the most common development standards you'll encounter using a typical R1 lot as our example. First up is setbacks. A setback is the required distance that a building must be set back from a property line. You'll have a front yard setback, a rear yard setback, and side yard setbacks. For example, the code might say your front setback is 20 feet. This means no part of your main house can be built within 20 feet of your front property line. Your side setbacks might be 5 feet each, and your rear setback might be 15 feet. Why do these exist? For light, air, privacy, and safety. It prevents people from building right up against their neighbor's window or creating a solid wall of houses along the street. These are non-negotiable. If you build a patio cover 1 foot into the setback without a permit, and a neighbor complains, the city can and will force you to tear it down. We've seen it happen. Next, you have height limits. This is pretty straightforward. It's the maximum allowed height of your structure. In many R1 zones in Southern California, this might be around 28 to 35 feet. But it's not always that simple. How is height measured? Is it from the natural grade of the land, the finished grade, the average grade? In hillside areas, this becomes incredibly complex with envelope restrictions that dictate the maximum height at different points on the slope. Building a two-story house on a flat lot in Garden Grove is one thing. Building a two-story house on a sloped lot in the Hollywood Hills is an entirely different beast, governed by a completely different set of height rules. Then we have lot coverage. This is the percentage of your total lot area that can be covered by buildings. A typical rule might be 40% or 50% lot coverage. So, if you have a 5,000 square foot lot and a 50% lot coverage limit, the footprint of all your structures, your house, your garage, any sheds, cannot exceed 2,500 square feet. This ensures that there's some open space on the property for landscaping, drainage, and just general breathing room. Closely related to lot coverage is floor area ratio, or FAR. This one trips a lot of people up. While lot coverage limits the footprint, FAR limits the total square footage of the building across all floors. FAR is expressed as a ratio. For instance, an FR of 0.5 on a 5,000 square foot lot means you can build a maximum of 2,500 square feet of total floor area, 5,000 x 0.5. You could build that as a single-story 2,500 square foot house, or a two-story house with 1,250 square feet on each floor. Many cities, especially those concerned with mansionization, use FAR as their primary tool to control the bulk and mass of new homes. The City of L.A. quote, S baseline mansionization ordinance is a prime example of this, with complex FAR calculations that can be increased with certain design features. And finally, for residential, let's talk about parking. For a single-family home, the rule is almost universally 2 covered parking spaces in a garage or carport. But where it gets interesting is with multifamily residential zones like R2, R3, and R4. An R2 zone allows for a duplex. An R3 or R4 zone allows for apartments or condos. For these, the parking requirements are much stricter. You might need 1.5 spaces per 1-bedroom unit, 2 spaces per 2-bedroom unit, plus guest parking. In a dense, land-scarce place like Southern California, a developer's entire project can hinge on their ability to meet the parking requirements. You can design the most beautiful 10-unit apartment building, but if you can only physically fit 15 parking spaces on the lot and the code requires 20, your project is dead on arrival unless you can get a variance, which is a very high bar to clear. Now let's pivot to something that has completely revolutionized residential zoning in California over the past decade: the Accessory Dwelling Unit, or ADU. You might know it as a granny flat, a casita, or a backyard cottage. For decades, building a second small home on a single-family lot was either illegal or incredibly difficult. But facing a severe housing crisis, the state of California stepped in and passed a series of laws, most notably Senate Bills 9 and 10, that effectively forced every city to allow ADUs. This is a critical point to understand. State law now preempts or overrides a lot of local zoning rules when it comes to ADUs. Your local city cannot simply ban them. They have to allow them, and they have to follow the state's minimum standards. So what are those standards? First, if you have a property zoned for single-family or multifamily use, you are generally allowed to build at least one ADU. This can be a conversion of an existing space, like a garage or a basement, an addition to your main house, or a brand new detached structure in your backyard. State law sets some important guardrails. For example, cities must allow an ADU of at least 800 square feet with a height limit of at least 16 feet and with setbacks of only 4 feet from the side and rear property lines. This 4-foot setback rule is huge. Remember those 5-foot or 10-foot setbacks we talked about for a main house? The state says for an ADU, 4 feet is enough. This opened up the possibility of building ADUs on thousands of lots that were previously considered too small. Furthermore, state law eliminates parking requirements for ADUs in many situations. If your property is within a half-mile of public transit, or in a historic district, or if the ADU is part of an existing structure, you are not required to provide an extra parking space for it. This was another massive barrier that the state removed. You can even, in many cases, build both an ADU and a junior ADU or jadu. A jadu is a unit created within the walls of the main house, no larger than 500 square feet, with its own exterior entrance and a small efficiency kitchen. So a single-family lot could potentially be turned into 3 living units. The main house, a jadu, and a detached ADU in the back. This has been a game changer for homeowners looking to generate rental income or create space for family members. However, it's not a complete free-for-all. Cities can still impose some of their own objective, quantifiable development standards. For instance, a city can limit the maximum size of an ADU. While they must allow one up to 800 square feet, they can choose to cap the maximum size at, say, 1,000 or 1,200 square feet. They can also impose design guidelines to ensure the ADU matches the look of the main house or the neighborhood. This is where you see the tension between state mandates and local control play out. You still have to submit your plans to the local city's planning and building departments, and they will review them to make sure you comply with both the state law and their local ordinance. We've built dozens of ADUs across LA and Orange County, and every single city has its own slightly different interpretation, its own preferred way of seeing the plans, its own set of submission requirements. It's a process you have to navigate with care. Okay, let's shift gears from the residential world to the commercial side. If you're a business owner or a commercial property investor, understanding commercial zoning is just as vital. The zones are typically designated with a C for commercial or M for manufacturing/industrial. Just like with residential, there are different levels. A C1 or local commercial zone might be intended for small neighborhood-serving businesses, a small cafe, a dry cleaner, a corner market. The rules here are often stricter to protect the adjacent residential areas. There might be limits on operating hours, restrictions on outdoor seating, and lower height limits. A C2 or general commercial zone is usually more permissive. This is where you'll find larger retail stores, restaurants, offices, and a wider range of businesses. The development standards are often less restrictive, allowing for larger buildings and more intense uses. Then you have CM or commercial manufacturing zones, which act as a buffer between heavy industrial uses and pure commercial areas. These zones might allow for things like auto repair shops, wholesale businesses, or artisan workshops, uses that are a bit more intensive than a standard retail shop, but not as disruptive as a large factory. What are the key zoning issues in commercial development? Parking is number one by a long shot. The parking requirements for commercial uses are calculated based on the type and intensity of the use. A retail store might need 1 parking space for every 250 square feet of floor area. An office might need 1 space for every 400 square feet, but a restaurant is the real killer. A city might require 1 parking space for every 100 square feet, or even 1 space for every 3 seats. For a 3,000 square foot restaurant, you could easily be required to provide 30 parking spaces. If your lot can't accommodate that, you have a major problem. Sometimes you can lease spaces from a nearby lot or pay an in-lieu fee to the city, but these options aren't always available or affordable. Another big one in commercial is the allowed uses list. For every commercial zone, the municipal code will have a detailed list of what businesses are permitted by right, what businesses require a conditional use permit, and what businesses are prohibited. A by right use means if you meet all the development standards, the city has to approve it. A bookstore in a C2 zone is usually a by right use. A conditional use permit, or CUP, is required for businesses that might have a bigger impact on the neighborhood, like a bar, a live music venue, or a gas station. With a CUP, you don't get automatic approval. You have to go through a public hearing process, where the planning commission and your potential neighbors get to weigh in. You have to prove that your business won't be a detriment to the community. This process can be long, expensive, and uncertain. We've seen projects die in the CUP process because of neighborhood opposition. This is one of those areas where having professional help to navigate the political and technical aspects is incredibly valuable. If you're looking at a property and your business requires a CUP, that should be a major red flag to do more research. A quick email to our team at info@oceanfrontbuilders.com with the address and the proposed use can often save you months of headache and thousands of dollars down the line. We can give you a preliminary opinion on how difficult that path might be. So far, we've been talking about the base zoning, the R1, the C2. But in Southern California, it's rarely that simple. The base zone is just the first layer of the cake. On top of that, you often have overlay zones or specific plans. An overlay zone is exactly what it sounds like. It's an extra layer of regulations that is laid over the existing base zoning to address a specific issue. Let's talk about the big ones you'll encounter here. First and foremost in our area is the coastal zone. If your property is anywhere near the coast, from Malibu down to San Clemente, you are likely in the coastal zone. This means that in addition to your local city's planning department, you are also subject to the jurisdiction of the California Coastal Commission. This is a state agency with a powerful mandate to protect coastal resources. Getting a permit for any kind of development in the coastal zone is a whole separate and often much more difficult process. They will scrutinize your project for its impact on public access to the beach, on coastal views, and on marine habitats. A simple deck remodel that would be an over-the-counter permit inland can become a months-long review process involving biologist reports and view corridor studies in the coastal zone. Building a new house in Laguna Beach or Newport Beach means you're essentially going through two separate and equally rigorous approval processes, one with the city and one with the Coastal Commission. It adds significant time and cost to a project, and you have to plan for it from day one. Another common overlay in Los Angeles is the Historic Preservation Overlay Zone, or HPOZ. LA has many neighborhoods with a strong architectural character, like areas with lots of craftsmen, Spanish colonial, or mid-century modern homes. To protect this character, the city creates an HPOZ. If your home is in an HPOZ, you can't just tear it down or do a modern remodel. Any exterior work, from changing a window to building an addition, has to be reviewed by a special HPOZ board. They will have very specific guidelines about materials, architectural style, scale, and massing. The goal is to ensure that new work is compatible with the historic character of the neighborhood. It doesn't mean you can't build or remodel, but it means you have to do it in a very specific, historically sensitive way. Then you have hillside ordinances. Much of LA and parts of Orange County are built on hills. Development in these areas carries extra risks like landslides and fires. To mitigate these risks, cities have special hillside overlay zones. These overlays will have much stricter rules for grading, how much dirt you can move, and they'll require extensive geological and soil reports to ensure the site is stable. They also have those complex height restrictions we mentioned earlier, and often have tighter limits on FAR and lot coverage to preserve the natural landscape. Beyond overlays, you also have specific plans. A specific plan is basically a custom-written, detailed zoning code for a particular area. Instead of just being Zone C2, a commercial corridor might be part of the Downtown Main Street specific plan. This plan will have its own unique set of rules that go far beyond the standard C2 regulations. It might dictate the architectural style, require certain types of businesses, mandate ground floor retail with residential units above, and have specific standards for landscaping and signage. Large master-planned communities, like much of Irvine, are essentially governed by a series of massive specific plans. If your property is in a specific plan area, you can pretty much throw the general zoning code out the window. You live and die by the rules of that specific plan document. So let's recap the layers. You have your base zone, R1. Then you check if you're in an overlay zone, coastal zone. Then you check if you're in a specific plan area. Each layer adds a new set of rules you have to follow. It's not uncommon for a single property in a place like Venice or Santa Monica to be in an R2 base zone inside the coastal zone, and also subject to a local community-specific plan. You have to satisfy the requirements of all three. This complexity leads to a crucial question. What happens when what you want to do doesn't quite fit the rules? Let's say the zoning code requires a 10-foot side setback, but because of the weird shape of your lot, you can only provide 8 feet. Is your project dead? Not necessarily. This is where you enter the world of discretionary review. So far, most of what we've talked about falls under by right development. If you follow all the rules in the code book, the setbacks, the height, the FAR, the city staff has to approve your project. They have no discretion. But when you ask for an exception to the rules, you are asking for a discretionary review. The two most common forms of this are a variance and a conditional use permit, which we touched on earlier. Let's focus on the variance. A variance is a request to deviate from a physical development standard, like a setback or height limit. But getting one is incredibly difficult, and cities don't grant them lightly. You can't just say, "I want a variance because I want a bigger house." That will be denied instantly. To get a variance, you have to prove a legal hardship. You have to demonstrate that due to the unique physical circumstances of your property, like its unusual shape or its steep topography, that applying the standard zoning rule would deprive you of the same property rights that your neighbors enjoy. For example, if you have a triangular-shaped lot and applying the standard rectangular setbacks would leave you with a tiny, unusable building area, you might have a legitimate case for a variance to reduce one of the setbacks. You have to prove that the hardship is not self-imposed, meaning you didn't do something to create the problem yourself, and that granting the variance will not be a detriment to the public or the neighborhood. This is a formal legal process. It involves filing a detailed application, paying significant fees, notifying all your neighbors, and presenting your case at a public hearing in front of a zoning administrator or planning commission. It's a high-stakes, high-cost process with no guarantee of success. This is why, as builders, our first goal is always to design a project that works by right. We treat the zoning code as our box of constraints and find the best possible design within that box. Relying on a variance is a risky strategy that should only be a last resort. Case Study 1. The Los Angeles ADU Project. A family in a Sherman Oaks neighborhood has a typical 6,000 square foot lot zoned R11. They have a 1,500 square foot house and a detached two-car garage in the back. They want to build an ADU to rent out for extra income. First step, we go to L.A. S. Zemus. We confirm the zone is R11. We check for overlays. They are not in a hillside area or an HPOZ. Great, that simplifies things. Second step, we analyze their options under the state and city ADU ordinances. Option A, convert the existing 400 square foot garage. This is often the fastest and cheapest route. Under state law, they can convert it and they don't need to add any new parking to replace the garage spots. They can build it on the existing footprint, even if it's right on the property line, as long as the structure is legally permitted. Option B, build a brand new detached ADU. The LA City Ordinance allows a detached ADU up to 1,200 square feet. However, the family wants to keep their garage. So we design a new unit in the backyard. Under state law, we only need 4-foot side and rear setbacks. This is huge, as the main house requires a 15-foot rear setback. This allows us to place the ADU much farther back, preserving more of the yard. We design a 1,000 square foot 2-bedroom unit that fits perfectly with the 4-foot setbacks. Because their property is within a half-mile of a major bus line on Ventura Boulevard, they are exempt from providing an extra parking space for the ADU. Third step, the challenge. During our site analysis, we discover that the home's main sewer line runs right through the area where they want to build the new ADU. We can't build over it, so the project now requires trenching and rerouting a portion of the sewer line. This adds unexpected cost and complexity. This is a classic construction challenge. The zoning says you can build it there, but the physical site conditions make it more difficult. This is the kind of detail that gets missed without a thorough site investigation before you even start drawing plans. We present the options and the revised budget to the client. They decide to proceed, and we engineer the new plumbing plan and submit the full set of architectural, structural, and civil plans to the LA Department of Building and Safety for plan check. Because it's an ADU and we are following all the rules, it's a by-right project and gets approved without any public hearings. Case Study 2, the Orange County Coastal Remodel. A client buys a 1960s single-story home on a small lot in Dana Point, west of the 5 freeway. They want to do a full gut remodel and add a second story to get an ocean view. First step, we check the city of Dana Point's zoning map. The property is zoned for single-family residential, but crucially, it's within the coastal zone. This is the big one. It's actually in an area where the city has its own certified local coastal program, but any major project will still be appealable to the Coastal Commission. Second step, we analyze the city's development standards. We look at the height limit, which is 25 feet. We look at the setbacks. And we look at something called view equity. Many coastal cities have policies to protect existing public and private views. We can't just throw up a massive second story that completely blocks the neighbor's peekaboo ocean view they've had for 30 years. We have to be sensitive to this. We hire a company to do a story pole analysis. We erect poles on the site that simulate the height and mass of the proposed second story. We take photos from neighboring properties to analyze the view impact. This becomes part of our submission package to the city. Third step, the process. We design a beautiful second-story addition that complies with the height limit, the setbacks, and the FR. But because we're in the coastal zone, it's not a simple building permit. We have to apply for a coastal development permit, or CDP, from the city. This is a discretionary review. We have to notify all the neighbors within 300 feet. The project has to go to a public hearing at the Planning Commission. Fourth step, the challenge. A neighbor 2 doors down is concerned that the new second story will create a shadow over their backyard garden in the afternoon. They write a letter to the Planning Commission opposing the project. Now we have to respond. We commission a shadow study where a professional consultant creates a 3D model of our project and the neighboring homes and simulates the path of the sun at different times of the day and year. The study shows that the new shadow impact is minimal and only occurs for a short period in the late afternoon during the winter months. We present this evidence at the hearing. The Planning Commission weighs our right to develop our property against the neighbors' concerns. Because we've done our homework, provided professional studies, and designed a project that is sensitive and compliant, the Commission approves our CDP. From there, we can finally submit our construction drawings for the building permit itself. The whole entitlement process took nearly a year before we could even think about breaking ground. That's the reality of developing in the coastal zone. These examples illustrate that understanding zoning is not just about reading a rule book, it's about strategy. It's about knowing which path is by right and which path requires a long and risky discretionary process. It's about anticipating challenges, whether they are buried sewer lines or a neighbor's concern over their view. It's about knowing how to present your case to the city and the community. The zoning code is the DNA of a city. It shapes how it grows, how it feels, and how it functions. And for you, as a property owner, it is the invisible architecture that governs your dreams and your investment. Whether you're planning a simple kitchen remodel that involves moving a window, adding an ADU for your parents, or trying to find the perfect location for your new business, your journey begins and ends with zoning. Don't underestimate its complexity. Don't assume that because your neighbor did something, you can too. Their lot might be different, or the code might have changed since they built their project. Do your homework. Use the online resources your city provides. And when it gets overwhelming, don't be afraid to ask for help. A good architect, a land use consultant, or an experienced design build firm can be your most valuable asset. They can navigate this maze for you, saving you time, money, and an immense amount of stress. This has been a very deep dive, and honestly, we've only scratched the surface. We could do an entire video just on parking regulations or HPOZ guidelines. But hopefully, this gives you a solid framework for how to think about zoning in Southern California. It's a puzzle, but it's a puzzle that can be solved. We build in Los Angeles and Orange County every single day. We are in front of planning counters from Santa Monica to Irvine dealing with these exact issues. It's the core of what we do. If you have a project in mind and you're feeling stuck or intimidated by the zoning and permitting process, that's where we come in. That's our specialty. Give our team a call. We can talk you through the specifics of your property and your goals. Thanks for sticking with us through this detailed breakdown. We know it's a lot of information, but our goal is to empower you with the knowledge you need to be a smarter property owner. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and make sure you're subscribed to the Oceanfront Builders channel for more in-depth content just like this. And if you have questions or ideas for future videos, drop them in the comments below. For a professional consultation on your next remodeling or new construction project, the best way to reach us is by phone. Our number is 888-336-8586. You can also see our portfolio of work and learn more about our design build process on our website at oceanfront.builders. That's oceanfront.builders. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you on the next one.